After their win against the Atlanta Falcons, the New York Jets are now slated to pick 7 in the 2026 NFL draft. Obviously, that could fluctuate a ton between now and the end of the season. And the reason why I am not sweating that the Jets are not going to have the number one overall pick is because the Jets are not the worst team in the NFL. They're not the second worst team in the NFL. They're not the third worst team in the NFL. The conversation probably starts shortly after that. Obviously, they're in the bottom tier. The reality is, I did aggressively root for a tank one time. That was the tank for Trevor season. I thought Trevor Lawrence was going to be really good. Not correct. And I did think that the Jets were the single worst team in the NFL that year in 2020 that won a couple of BS games. The Jets this year, they are simply not worse than the Titans, Raiders, and Saints. The New York Jets, in terms of, now there's lots of things you could look at. You could look at, they all have a bad record. There's DVOA and success rate and all these charts. But I think when you're comparing teams that have a similar win-loss total, net points, your point differential is a good next thing to look at. The Jets have negative 69 points on the year. The Saints negative 114. The Raiders negative 131. The Titans negative 158. The gap in point differential between the Jets and the Titans is smaller than the gap between the Jets and the NFC's 1 seed Chicago Bears right now. So there's just levels to horrific that the Jets are just not approaching right now. I mean, the Raiders and Titans, I would take the Jets minus 3.5 against those teams on a neutral field. They're just not bad enough. They're going to play the Saints in a couple of weeks in New Orleans. They're going to beat the Saints, if I had to guess. So that's my succinct answer to it. They're not going to have a number one or number two overall pick because those are reserved for the single worst and second teams in the NFL, which the Jets don't belong to. It's as simple as that, and we don't want them to belong to it. I know that you'd want the Jets to be winning games, and maybe should have won some more games earlier. Winning them in more convincing fashion because it's special teams. Nick Folk, 40-something-year-old kicker. How does that translate? Well, look, here's the thing. All the things I say about this football team are recorded on the internet forever, right? For better or worse. And if you remember, the Jets lost multiple games, you could argue, due to special teams errors in the beginning of the year. The season opener, they're up, double digits on Pittsburgh. They're looking awesome. And the momentum changer was the Xavier Gipson fumble, which really honestly sent the team into like a 2-month funk. I can't be told otherwise. I think it just psychologically, they were like, oh my gosh, it all felt so different, but we're just the Jets again. The Gipson fumble, I think it broke them a little bit. Took a while to get back to it. But you win that game if he doesn't fumble. I don't care what you don't know. No, come on. They were going to win that game if he didn't cough up that football. Then you fast forward a couple weeks later, Monday Night Football in Miami, Isaiah Williams, who's now like an all-pro returner, I guess. Remember, he fumbled the opening kickoff out of halftime, and the Dolphins scored. And then he fair caught a punt on his own 3-yard line, right? And the Jets lose both of those games by 1 possession. So just pretend that those losses happen now and the wins because of it happened earlier, and it's all kind of the same. And at the time that was happening, I was very critical of the team. Like, how could you still roster Xavier Gipson when whatever it was, 11 fumbles in not that many games. He goes to the Eagles, I think it is. He fumbles immediately there. And it was justified to critique that. And Isaiah Williams, how does this guy not know the rules? Why is he fumbling too, right? Or criticizing that. Fair enough. But now, when Chris Banjo's unit has turned into, honestly, a historically great special teams unit in terms of points added, they're the third highest since they started keeping track of advanced special team stats. They're the third highest in NFL history. So now that's just luck or fluky. When they were doing bad, it's incompetence, and we're laughing at them. That's just not fair to me. You kind of have to pick a lane. So to me, the easy answer is when those guys are messing up, that's a reflection on the coaching staff, deserves criticism. When they're doing really, really well, that is a reflection on the coaching staff and Banjo and Glenn for hiring him and the front office for getting guys like they brought in McNamara and Nick Folk and Isaiah Williams, and they decided to roster Stiggers. They kept they re-signed Nwangwu. So yeah, like having a awesome special teams is one of the reasons why they're not as bad as the Jets, Saints, and Raiders. And I think that you want your teams to show signs of being detail oriented. Um, Having a good special teams is a sign that you are trying to be detail oriented. So there it is. There's a long winded video about a 3-9 football team that just isn't bad enough to be picking first, second, or really third. And that's it. Go Jets.